Hello and welcome to another Smaulgld live stream. Tonight, it is the 8th of October 2019. Tonight's topic is how the Fed's overnight and term repos impact its balance sheet. I have heard over the last month some of the most ridiculous things about the Fed and what it's doing. Now, I understand people don't like the Fed, they don't trust the Fed. But I've heard so much whole-scale speculation, making things up, insisting that numbers don't square, that someone's lying, that they're making up. There's just a total lack of understanding of where to look for the actual data. The Fed has laid out exactly what it's doing, and I'm going to show you where it all is, what the Fed is doing, and what it means. If you can find the data, you don't make up and start speculating what you think is happening. I've seen so many people get all riled up about what the Fed is doing or not doing and insisting they're doing this or they're doing that. They're taking bad collateral, they're a pawn shop. Absolute nonsense, and that the Fed is not coming clean, and that there's discrepancies in the balance sheet between the mortgage-backed securities, and none of it is true. I'm sorry to say it's very sloppy work that I've seen. A lot of these channels going off it. So what we're going to do is, I did have some questions, and I've tried to lay out in the video I did this morning, explain the difference between mortgage-backed securities that were purchased by the Fed as part of the 2008 bailout and the agency mortgage-backed securities that they're using or they're accepting as collateral as part of the repo. What I want to do tonight is put together a very comprehensive overview of the available data that is out there, and it does square. There's no discrepancies. The only discrepancies you can find are if you don't find everything because you're convinced that everything is screwed up, or because you don't follow the definitions, or you're looking on the wrong pages. Tonight, I'm going to show you what the Fed says they're doing and the numbers that back it up. Now, I did have some questions, even if you do understand and you have followed the last 5 videos that I have done on this topic. There's still some questions that remain, such as what collateral, and we've covered that, but we're going to go through that again, is being allowed, is considered as good collateral for this repo operation, which banks are allowed to use the facility, what impact does it have on the Fed's balance sheet, and are there any discrepancies between what the Fed is showing and on their repo operation and what's showing on their balance sheet? There's not. And then also, for people who do understand, they say, well, wait a minute, 75 billion a day, isn't that massive? And we're going to explain why it's not cumulative. We're going to go through the overnight repos and then the term repos, because some people astutely point out, well, if it's an overnight repo and it's 75 billion every night, then there's no increase in the balance sheet. And that makes sense. Yes, but a lot of people have avoided looking at the term repos. There are also some 14-day repos. So I'm going to explain to you what's going on and what the Fed has presented. Now, once you know what the Fed says they're doing, if you want to criticize it from there, have at it. But when you don't have any data, you have half the data, and then you decide you're just going to make up. Oh, they're taking CLOs. Oh, they must be doing this. They must be doing that. Why should anyone believe you if you haven't even bothered to look at the actual source data? It makes no sense to me. I understand not trusting the Fed, but if the Fed shows stuff and it's available, then they are transparent. Yes, there's no audit, but that doesn't mean that everything that they do, you can just speculate and fill in blanks because you haven't found something or you can't make sense of the numbers. So you just say, well, they must be making it up. They must be taking collateral, bad collateral. This must be a bailout. That doesn't make any sense. That's just because you want to believe that. Now, let's stop talking about that and really look into what exactly this repo is. And I'm going to take you step by step through it. And someone just says, so nothing is wrong? Oh yeah, something is wrong. But it's not what people are saying is wrong. This is a function of the financial system not functioning correctly because of the intervention that the Fed does. And I'm going to explain how they do all this intervention, who they do it with, and why it's screwed up. But it doesn't mean that they're buying bad collateral, that they're a pawn shop, or any of this other nonsense that it's getting people all excited when it's absolutely incorrect. It's nothing but speculation, and it doesn't follow what's actually been said is happening, and actually what the reporting is happening. So let's get right into what this is all about, okay? So a while back, the Fed announced that they were going to do this repo. It caught a lot of people off guard. They said, why do you have to do this? Okay, there was a shortage of available overnight loans being made in the normal repo market. The banks that participated in it said, oh, well, if you want the money, 10%. Well, remember, the Fed had just announced that they had reduced interest rates, and the purpose of the Fed, they think that their goal is to keep interest rates at a certain point. So they don't really set interest rates. They set a Fed funds rate, and then they actually try to manipulate the market. Now, this isn't good. And again, you can criticize the Fed all day for this. This is an actual function of the Fed. What the Fed does is they came out and they said that they were going to do this repurchase operations agreement. And then they decided it was only going to be temporary. And then they said on October 4th, we're going to do it a little longer. We're going to do it to November. And that freaked everyone out. And they explained that this repo operation would be conducted out of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. Now, that should tell you that's where you go to look to see what information the Fed is providing. You go to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York website. And I'm going to go through what they've posted. They're not hiding anything. They may be, but the point is they're showing you exactly what they say they're doing. Now, they said that they will conduct this repo operation with their primary dealers, and we're going to get into a second who the primary dealers are and what their purpose is. They're in cahoots with the Fed. No two ways about it, and the Fed admits it. But first and foremost, the collateral was stated up front that they would accept Treasury, U.S. Treasuries, agency debt, and agency mortgage-backed securities. Now, why would you then go off on a tangent and start speculating about what collateral they may be taking? There's no reason to speculate. They've said what they're taking. Now, one confusing factor for a lot of people is they hear the word mortgage-backed security, and rightfully, they start thinking, oh, I remember that garbage. That was the mortgages that they rolled up. I saw the movie where they rolled up those mortgage-backed securities. They weren't good, and that's what caused the financial crisis. There were a lot of bad mortgages. Just putting them all in one security doesn't make them any better. They started to default, and we had a problem. And we know the Fed actually bought a lot of those mortgage-backed securities off of the too big to fail banks, and to add insult to injury, paid 100% on the dollar. Now, knowing that, I can see where you would say, well, screw the Fed and screw this whole system. Look what they do. Yes, but remember, the reason you know they did that is they were in your face about it, and they told us that they did that. And that purchase of mortgage-backed securities is fully disclosed on the Fed's balance sheet. It's still there. It's $1.7 trillion. If you want to get upset about something, get about something that's real. That's a fact. They did that. It's still there. They still own a lot of that stuff. Okay, that doesn't mean that that's what they're doing now. Indeed, the confusion, at least on this particular aspect, is about the Fed saying that they're going to use mortgage-backed securities as collateral. Well, first of all, unlike in 2008, those were outright purchases. The Fed said, you got that garbage, we'll take it from you. Don't worry about it. It's not on your balance sheet anymore. That junk is on ours. Outrage granted. Now, this is different. They are only lending money on this particular collateral, which is U.S. Treasuries, agency debt, and agency mortgage-backed securities. Now, agency mortgage-backed securities are not the same as mortgage-backed securities packaged up by banks and sold to unsuspecting investors and with a rating agency slapped on a AAA. These are actually mortgages that are bundled together, the Ginnie Mae mortgages, that are guaranteed by the full faith and credit of the United States. Now, many of you say, oh, the full faith and credit of the United States, that's not worth anything. Well, maybe it's not worth anything to you, but anything that has the guarantee of the United States, such as U.S. Treasuries, agency debt, and these agency mortgage-backed securities are considered the highest collateral. This is what the Fed says they're going to accept if you come to the repo window for cash. Now, who gets it? Primary dealers. Who are primary dealers? Here's another reason to be pissed off. Who are the primary dealers? I'm going to tell you who they are and what their purpose is. Again, if you're going to be mad at something, be mad at the facts, not mad at the speculation. Primary dealers. This is, again, right on the Federal Reserve Bank of New York's website. They are trading counterparties of the New York Fed. They are partners with the Fed in its implementation of monetary policy. Now, monetary policy means market manipulation. It means the Fed thinks it's their job to meet that dual mandate of stable prices and full employment, which means they can do whatever they want as long as it's within those goals. Part of the monetary policy is they're trying to get to a 2% inflation target, and they're trying to target interest rates at around 2%. These primary dealers are expected to work with the Fed in order to do it. It says they are expected to make markets for the New York Fed on behalf of its official account holders as needed, and to bid on a pro rata basis in all Treasury auctions at reasonably competitive prices. The Fed does a Treasury auction. They can't say, yeah, you know what, I'm not interested this time. No. They've got to bid, whether they want to or not. Now, think about that. You're one of the too big to fail banks. You are a primary dealer. You have to manage your balance sheet according to the Fed wants you to buy. They want you to bid, you got to buy. Well, that means that maybe you don't have enough cash lying around because you bought a lot of treasuries because you were forced to buy a lot of treasuries. They work together. So if the Fed makes you buy treasuries, and for that reason you don't have cash because you spent it on the treasuries, the Fed has to come to your aid and say, give us those treasuries back and we'll give you the cash. Now you see how it all works as long as you're accepting of the fact that this is what these guys do. Now, you want to be further annoyed? Primary dealers. Who are they? You think these would be U.S. banks. Wrongo star. They are, half of them are foreign banks. And that's not a good thing because none of these... Anyway, look at the list of primary dealers. All of these banks are considered partners with the bank in implementing its monetary policy. So, as an American citizen, Banque Paribas is helping the Fed make sure that its monetary policy is in place. Let's go back to, so is Société Générale, so is Deutsche Bank, so is Daiwa Capital, Credit Suisse, UBS Securities. Half of these banks are foreign. Let's go back and look at what the New York Federal Reserve Bank website says at the top of it. Federal Reserve Bank of New York, serving the 2nd District and the nation. Why don't they just say, and the world? I don't think that one doesn't show it. Let me just show you so you can see it. I'm just reading it off the top. There you go. Federal Reserve Bank of New York, serving the 2nd District and the nation, and essentially and the world, because they view the world is their oyster. You cannot conduct monetary policy in a vacuum, they believe, and therefore they've enlisted the help of these primary dealers. And of course, if they don't have the cash to lend in the market, or if they do have the cash, but they want to lend it at 10%, that's no good. The Fed is they just lowered interest rates. They're trying to keep them short-term rates at 2%. So they need to get the rates down at 2%. So they need to liquefy. They need to add liquidity into the repo market. And the way they do that is they say, hey, you guys got good collateral. You've got agency debt. You have agency mortgage-backed securities. And of course, we know you have U.S. Treasuries. Throw them our way and we'll give you the cash. Now, continue how all this works. And it's all laid out. There's no mystery here. What is a repo and reverse repo agreement on the New York Federal Reserve website? The New York Fed is authorized by the Federal Open Market Committee. That's the committee that meets with Powell and says, we're going to lower interest rates. We want to lower interest rates. So the New York Fed is the number one bank in the Federal Reserve System that does all this stuff. The rest of them are irrelevant. Kansas City, Boston. Okay. they execute repo and reverse repo agreements. And it says these repo agreements are conducted only with primary dealers, who we just showed you the list of. And then the repurchase agreements is just the reverse of it. They then sell those treasuries back either to the people they got them from as collateral, or they just sell them in the open market. But they also sell those not just to primary dealers, but to an expanded set of reverse repo counterparties that includes banks, government-sponsored enterprises, and money market funds. Again, it says here, just to be clear, there's no mystery. In a repo transaction, the New York desk purchases U.S. Treasuries, agency debt, or agency mortgage-backed securities. Not mortgage-backed securities. They call them MBS. This is very important. It's an old legal trick. If you call something, if the definition is MBS, and you would think that means mortgage-backed securities, but if they write agency mortgage-backed securities and then they put MBS in the brackets, they mean agency mortgage-backed securities. I know it's confusing, but they did not intend to, in my opinion, there'd be no reason why they'd want to give off the impression that they would accept anything less than the top credit. And it even says it's economically similar to a loan collateralized by securities having a value higher than the loan to protect the desk against market and credit risk. The Fed is taking no risk in this because all this stuff, the treasuries, the agency debt, and the agency mortgage-backed securities are backed. They're guaranteed by the U.S. government. For whatever that's worth a lot in the financial markets. So they've clearly said this is what they're doing. They're going to do repos, reverse repos, and they explain what they are on their website. All right, let's move on now to what's been going on. They didn't announce it and then leave it to chance that, yeah, we're doing it, so you don't need to know. Every day they update what they've been doing. And then again, it's published on the New York Fed's website. We're going to go through this. But one thing a lot of people, and this is important now, just to keep in mind, they announced this, I guess the kind of communication to the market hasn't been as clear. You can just blame CNBC or whatever financial media. They've only talked about the overnight repo, that's where the big problem is. But again, on the website, it talks about, and they list, it says, in accordance with the most recent FOMC meeting, remember that's the meeting with Powell and the other people that make the decision whether to lower or raise interest rates, that the open market trading desk, they call it the desk, that's the New York Fed, will conduct a series of overnight and term repurchase agreement repo operations to help maintain the federal funds rates within the target range. That means the Fed is not just offering overnight loans, but also term repurchase loans. Those term repurchase loans go up to 14 days. Now, this is why, just keep that in mind, this is why it's not $75 billion every day and then it goes away in the morning and it's a wash. It's because some of these repos are 14 days. So the balance sheet will increase to the extent that the overnight is a wash, but that the repurchase agreements will carry on for 14 days. And who are they doing this with? Right back at you, the primary dealers. They come, they present their collateral, and they get the money. All right. And then it says again here, it's not like they haven't said it. This is the third time. Securities eligible as collateral. It doesn't say anything about CLOs or toxic waste or whatever it says here. The collateral that's available for both the overnight and the term repurchase operations or repurchase agreements are U.S. Treasuries, agency debt, and agency mortgage-backed securities. They cannot be any clearer on this. Anyone who is speculating and they don't understand and it's probably this and they're not telling us, no, they are. You're just not looking in the right place. I'm showing you. I'll leave the links below. I'll put the website. Smaulgld already has all this information. This is about the 5th time I've gone through this, but I'm intending this to be the most comprehensive because I've heard so much people just making stuff up and people believing it and then insisting this is the end of the world. And no, this is just how a flawed financial system works, because the Fed has intervened and the Fed is trying to keep rates at 2%, is working with all these too big to fail banks, foreign and domestic, in order to keep its monetary policy in place. you see what the thing to be angry about is that the Fed actually controls the entire system, and it can intervene, and when it intervenes, it has to intervene even more. It's bigger and badder than all of those banks. Those banks are required to do a service for the Fed. They're like made men having to work for the Godfather. Think of it that way. The Fed calls upon them, and you got to buy some treasuries. And then after that, maybe you got to buy some more. But don't worry about it. We'll take care of you. And that's what this is all about. This is not about pawn shop and repo madness. This is about the Fed flexing its muscle and saying, yeah, we printed the money. We give you the money, you bring us the collateral. What collateral? The collateral that you bought from us before. You know, you buy the treasuries. Mario Draghi says, this is fine. Okay, anyway, just trying to lighten it up here. Now that we know that, let's see what the Fed says it's doing every night. It actually tells us every day what it bought and how much of it. Okay, here we go from the website. They did on October 8th, they did a term repo in a certain amount, and they did an overnight repo in a certain amount. Okay, the one at the bottom is the 14-day term repo. They purchased a total, or they took collateral on $38.8 billion, and of which 9.5 were mortgage-backed securities. They had no agency debt, and they took $29 billion in treasuries. That's due in 14 days. On the overnight side, they did $37 billion. 6 in mortgage-backed securities, 31.7 in treasuries. Wait, it says mortgage-backed securities. That's new information. No, it's not. This has been, unfortunately, you have to read the definition. Mortgage-backed security means agency mortgage-backed security, not the Big Short mortgage-backed security. All right, now, what does all this have to do with the balance sheet? A lot of great questions. Is this going to be inflationary? Does this increase the money supply? How much money are they printing? How come the Fed said that they're lowering their numbers of mortgage-backed securities, but yet we see here they're buying all these mortgage-backed securities? What's going on? They're lying. We need an audit. Calm down. As we mentioned, and I'm going to show you right now, the Fed's balance sheet. That's what this is all about. The Fed's balance sheet shows the mortgage-backed securities. People are like, oh, I was on the St. Louis site. I was on this site. I was on that site. Okay, just go to the Fed's balance sheet. Here it is. There's those nasty $1.467 trillion of mortgage-backed securities. They're staring you in the face. 7 or 8 lines down, factors affecting the reserve balance, a depository institution, reserve bank credit, related items, reserve balances of deposit institutions at the Federal Reserve Bank. There they are. They're not hiding them. 1.467 billion treasuries. And yes, they've gone down since September. You can see the line on them there, 10.9 billion. 214 billion since October 3rd. But wait a minute, how come that number isn't going up? Because we see that they're buying mortgage-backed securities. No, they're not. They're accepting agency mortgage-backed securities. Well, I don't see it on the balance sheet. They must be lying. You can't trust them. And they're... Okay, there's another line item. Repurchase agreements. Ah, there you go. There they are, 171 billion, and that includes all of, not just the mortgage-backed agency mortgage-backed securities, but the treasuries and the agency debt that they took as collateral. They've done this because this is a separate operation. The mortgage-backed securities were just loaded up on as part of the bailout. That number, whatever they do with that number, if they sell those off, they sell those off. Don't expect that number to go higher as a result of the repo. It may go higher if they decide. Now, this is not to say that the Fed doesn't turn around next week and say, you know what? We want to really just help the banks out and we want to do buy mortgage-backed securities from the bank. They'll announce that. They're not going to do that on the side. They're not going to hide that. They've got a $1.467 trillion eyesore on their balance sheet, and they're trying to sell that down. And remember, they're not omnipotent. The reason they're doing all this is the reason they have to do this is because they did this other stuff in the first place. This is all the unintended consequences of intervention. A central bank isn't supposed to do all this stuff. All a central bank is supposed to do is sit back and wait for a bank to fail and then maybe send it some money. No, that's not what they've done. They've bailed them out. They've created this. They've manipulated interest rates. And now that they've decided they were going to lower interest rates, well, that caused this. They've got this liquidity crisis. So now they have to go do this. They have to add a new line item to their balance sheet. But again, they're not hiding it. It's there. It's just that when people don't see it, they make the assumption, oh, mortgage-backed securities, they said they're getting rid of those, but we know that they're buying mortgage-backed securities as part of the repo. How come it's not going up? They must be lying. This is unbelievable. And they're buying bad collateral and they're a pawn shop. No, none of that. The repurchase agreement line contains the agency mortgage-backed securities, the agency debt, and the U.S. Treasuries. Now, none of this is a pretty picture. You could be annoyed at this. They're telling you what to be annoyed at. But to make up stuff, I think is a disservice. I mean, it's all here. There's nothing that they've... Now, you could say, and this is what I get all the time, I can't trust anything they say. Fine. But then can you trust what somebody else says about it? First of all, somebody said today was in the comments, I can't trust anything Powell says. And I said, okay, well then can you trust they're doing the repo? Well, yeah, okay, well, I'll trust that they're doing that. I mean, there does come a point where I understand healthy skepticism about what any of these large entities say without an audit. But that doesn't mean then, if you can't trust what they're saying, that you trust what someone on YouTube says. And someone, or everyone is saying, is just making up stuff. Because there's actually no consequences for people on YouTube just to make up stuff. And to say, oh, they're buying this or they're buying that or whatever. I mean, there would be consequences if, I mean, there's a lot of parties involved. Now, again, they are thick as thieves. 29 primary dealers. They're all part of the same hypocrisy, right? Working with the Fed. But those banks are audited. So you don't necessarily need to audit the Fed to see how the banks are engaging in some of these activities. And we do know that they unloaded their toxic mortgage-backed securities back in 2008 to the Fed. I mean, that shows up, and they have a cleaner balance sheet. So you can triangulate a lot of this stuff here. All right, what else do we have here, just so everyone's clear on this? And here's the other thing. It's a lot more exciting, a lot more fun just to make up stuff, or because you can't see something to then speculate and so on. But there it all is. I mean, that's what's happening. It's not a pretty picture. But it doesn't mean the Fed is a pawn shop. It doesn't mean the Fed is taking any collateral. It doesn't mean that they're lying and we can't square the mortgage. Sure you can. You can square all these numbers. You can't prove the numbers, but the idea that the accounts are screwed up, that somehow the St. Louis Fed has one set of books and the New York Fed has another set of books, complete nonsense. It's all right here. I'll leave you the links. I take screenshots of all this stuff. I put it on Smaulgld.com. Anyone who's interested in actually doing a little bit of work and go to the websites themselves and see it. Instead, what people think doing research is going on YouTube and listen to other YouTube people try to explain stuff, and they're just making up stuff. Sorry, but that's what I see happening. I haven't seen anybody actually explain this. And in fact, the mainstream media is no better. They're doing repo overnight. No, and they don't say anything. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York has it all laid out. It all squares within their own numbers. I mean, if they're making it up, they're making it up. But the point is, at least give them the credit that they've actually squared their numbers. They do square. If you can't find them, then you just start making up that, the Fed's making it up. No, they're not. They have all the numbers there. All right, let's see what you guys are saying in the comments here. Robert Hammock is here. Good to see you. Max Strong. All right. Phil McCain. Haven't seen you in a while. Phil, good to see you here. Fiona is here. Hello, hello. Pablo is here. Ann is here. Anthony M. So nothing is wrong. I think we covered that. Rick Smart. So you should stop being a Fed shill. I am anything but a Fed shill. I am not a fan of the Federal Reserve System. What I'm more not a fan of are people who decide once you're against something, you just make stuff up and you just trash it and criticize it. If you live in a free society, everyone has a right to at least be treated fairly. You don't just assume and just say, wow, it's the Fed, they got to be lying, so we're going to make them into a pawn shop, and we know that they're evil, so J.P. Morgan, yeah, they killed Bambi all right, and we'll get them for that too. I mean, this is really the mob mentality. Once you're on side with something, you could say anything as long as you have a bunch of foaming at the mouth people listening to you, wanting to believe the worst about either the Fed or Donald Trump, whoever it is. We see it all the time, and no one likes it. No one likes it when you're, and I don't like the Fed, but no one likes it when their own guy or their own entity is attacked unfairly. And clearly no one likes it when themselves are attacked unfairly. I don't like to see anything. I don't like to see people make up stuff because they don't know any better or they don't know where to look and then just trash it and get everybody all excited and then assume that they've learned something. And now they have the facts, so now they have more reason to be against the Fed. There's enough reasons to be against the Fed without having to make stuff up. And I think I outlined all of that for you tonight. All right. Only mug shilling takes place on this channel, says Max. That's right. I shill mugs, and if you insult my mugs, I'm coming for you. DW, Fiona, that was a nice gift you gave Smaulgld. Yes, that was indeed. That was very nice of Fiona to send me my 2 gems. She's a gem. And she sent me a piece of amber. Very much appreciated. And Holloman, let's see what else. Anthony says, see, Anthony, they won't let me show your comment. But that's all right. Anyway, I'm going to put up, while I'm going through your comments, if you have enjoyed this, maybe if you haven't, but if you have enjoyed this and other programs, please consider becoming a Smaulgld patron. I'm up to $114 a month. Isn't that nice? That's very nice. And I'm up to, I think, $40 a month on Subscribestar. So we're building a big base here. I really appreciate that. You can also donate via Bitcoin or Litecoin. You can hold up your phone to the QR codes there. Or you can do like Fiona did. You can send me a small gift. I really appreciate that. Some people on the chat right now have done so. I appreciate that. Checks and cash and stamps and all kinds of nice things. And to Smaulgld LLC, P.O. Box 714, Dover, New Hampshire 03820. And again, you can become a patron or a Subscribestar member or even a one-time donation on PayPal. I do appreciate it. And I do appreciate the fact that the people that come here, I know a lot of people come and they get turned off and they're like, I don't want to hear that. I want to hear the piling on the Fed. I want to hear the speculation. I want to hear silver set to skyrocket, COMEX to fall, China to crush the dollar. I don't say any of those things unless they're true. Gold back you on, game changer, and so on. People love narratives and they like to think they're independent thinkers. Most people aren't, and I don't expect the channel to grow that much because most people would rather hear speculation. They want to get excited. Don't get all excited. You're getting a little bit excited. They want to get all excited. They do. And many of you listening, maybe some of you do. You like to get, I don't know what it is, you trigger yourself. You go around, you binge watch all these channels. Oh my God, the Fed, yeah, we'll get them, and this guy must be a shill if he doesn't, he's working, he's a banker shill. Someone tries to tell the truth and they're a shill for the Fed. I'm not working for the Fed. That's the last, hey, I didn't get my check if that's the case. And I don't want Federal Reserve notes. I want gold. I want them to send me gold. Nomadic Giant is here. Are you out of the Philippines? Where are you now? All right. DW, more to come next time for Mrs. Count. Oh, that's very nice. Helping the Mrs. house. He's got a nice collection of Ukrainian amber and Russian garnet. That's very, very kind. All right. Let's see. Pablo. Did I hear right that Powell said he is not officially doing QE, but will start stimulus? So what is the new term, stimulus one? I think what Powell has said, and again, I listen to all this stuff. I don't get my information secondhand. I may read stuff and listen to YouTube pumpers after the fact. I will actually listen to the entire Powell press conference. I will read the entire Fed minutes. I won't read first what some channel says about it because they cherry pick what they want to say about it. And then if they don't see what they want to see, they just make up other stuff. So when you listen to this channel, I tell you if I've looked at, and you guys know, I've been through the minutes line by line sometimes with you guys. So what is Powell saying about QE? What is Powell saying about negative interest rates? He's on record as saying he doesn't really want to go to negative rates. That doesn't mean he won't, but he's saying he doesn't want to. He prefer to buy assets. That would be the stimulus. And in fact, the Fed is working on a plan that they'll have to publish next year on what type of assets they may want to buy. And some of those assets currently are not allowed. They might have to go to Congress and ask for this. This is going to be quite a showdown. But you remember, if the stock market were to fall 50% and the Fed said, like Mario Draghi. We know how to fix it with the monetary policy. We just buy the stocks. We print the money. We buy the stocks. Yeah. And if Lizzie Warren is president or the Congress, whoever it is, they'll say, that's a good idea. You can put the stock market back up. Go ahead and print the money. And that's what I think they're working on. All right. What else do we have? Well, yes, Nomadic Giant is in Thailand. Nomadic Giant is a patron of the Smaulgld channel. Thank you very much. Let's see. What else do we have here? Pablo, Dow went down after Trump made an announcement that Chinese individuals linked to human rights abuses will have their visas frozen and stock went down, what I heard. Yeah, okay. Let's see. What else do we have in the comments section? Chinese are coming. Here we are. Tricky guy, Sal for Salivate Metal. Anyone know who Salivate Metal is? Multitude of gratitude. All right. Sal at Salivate Metal said you're the smartest guy on YouTube after I told him to make fun of his voice. Yeah, Sal and I tell you, we get along very well. We don't hang out enough online. I think we did 2 shows. I've done shows with pretty much everyone, but he would be good to have on. Hubzilla is here, but he's gone. How will the Fed expand its balance sheet without QE? Well, I think probably you're hitting the nail on the head, because what is QE? It's buying assets. But we don't call it QE. We call it printing the money and buy the assets, and then we put them on the balance sheet, and that's what it is. We don't have to call it QE. Yeah, let's see. What else do we have? Tricky guy. Lose two most often used words. Calm down. No. You got to calm down just a little bit there, tricky guy. I thought my two most common words were disgruntled lawyer. All right, what else do we have? Always good to be calm. Yep. Tricky guy, all together now. Let's tell Lou to calm down when he's making fun of Chicken Little types. I'm feeling abused. I'm not, actually, I'm kind of a Chicken Little prepper guy myself. But the thing is, if you are going to be Chicken Little, and you are going to be a prepper, you need to know what you're prepping for, and you need to know what you're afraid of. You should not be afraid that the Fed is a pawn shop and that they're doing repo madness and any of the other nonsense that they're buying. You need to know what they're doing. And what they're doing isn't right, and it's not a good thing. That's a good thing, because the 1% got all the money, and the millionaires and the billionaires. No, you need to know what they're doing. You cannot just be generally in like a general direction. What does they say in Monty Python? I thought in your general direction. No, you need to know exactly which direction the problem is coming from and what the problem is. You don't just make up what the problem is. And that's what I hear happening. People just making up stuff. All right. DW, we learn a lot by listening to Smaulgld. All right. I love Ann Holland. She's always having these sidebar conversations. Very distracting for me, though, because I've learned now, but she knows. Everyone knows. If you want my attention, you put Smaulgld in there, so I kind of just blaze by your comments. If you guys are talking, I know you, Louisa Cutter, I know what you're talking about here. Jail time, Ross Albright. All right, bring Sal back. Tricky guy, I'm a prepper. I have an extra bag of sugar in my pantry. Sugar's a good item. Green coffee beans are good because they last and they're a good barter item. People always want coffee. I always say whiskey, cognac, not wine and beer because they don't last long, but spirits last. Even if you don't drink them yourself, you can barter for them. What else? Wow, I didn't know booking can pass 1 year. All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining me tonight. And don't forget to sign up to one of the... Look at all those choices. You know, they tell me if you offer too many choices in sales, they just gloss over because people aren't intelligent enough to look at all the different offers. They want to have... They say 2 offers are the best, sometimes 3. 1 is not enough. They just bypass it. But if you give 2, people are like, should I do Subscribe Star, Patron, or Subscribe Star? And they pick 1. If you just say patron, they're like, patron, forget it. Bitcoin, Litecoin, anyway. Smaulgld Classic, Super Classic mug, which should you buy? But I think this is a bit messy. If someone can help me with a better fundraising page, be much appreciated because this, I think, just says whatever you got. And then people look at it and they get confused and they say, I forget about it. Hope you don't do that. I hope... October, it doesn't look promising yet, though. I mean, September was a very good month. We had about 7 or 8 patrons and a Subscribe Star member, but I think so far in October it's just a couple. I guess people don't want to hear actual analysis. They want to hear speculation and they want to have their buttons pushed, but I don't do that other than to Tricky Guy because he deserves it. Have a good night.